technology permits, we can go live and the audience will see us in a couple of seconds. So I want to wish you a very, very warm welcome today on this new webinar that we are organizing on the situation in Cambodia, which is very concerning. Today we have a highly distinguished panel that is being co-hosted by the ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights, APHR, and Liberal International. With us, we have Musa Kua, who is an APHR board member, also vice president of the Cambodia National Rescue Party from Cambodia. We have Kun Kasit Piromia, the former foreign minister of Thailand, also serving former member of parliament, now sitting on the board of APHR. As well as with us, we have Abir Al-Sahlani, vice president of the Bureau of Liberal International and Swedish member of European Parliament, who we are delighted to have with us together with her lovely daughter. So thank you very much for allowing your time to be together with us, and warm welcome to the audience, which is going to be together with us in the next 45-50 minutes to discuss a very important issue, and that is a recently launched campaign to end impunity and bring about justice in Cambodia. We know that Cambodia is constitutional, pluri-party, pluri-democratic country. However, in the recent years, we have seen that the situation has plummeted and the disrespect of human rights has been absolutely on a very gross scale. So without further ado, let's discuss this particular specific issue that we want to bring about today. I would start with Musa Kua. You are a very renowned also human rights activist in your country. You have actually dedicated your life to the human rights issues in your country, apart from serving in politics. And it was exactly these days, 3 years ago, end of September, that you were receiving direct death threats from many sides. And your life was threatened. And if it was not your quick reaction to escape and from Cambodia within week times without anything, perhaps we would not have been able to talk to you now. One can say you're lucky to live in exile because you have escaped the prison like thousands of other people, but living in exile is being hard. And it's good that you are able to be free and to speak, because you were the one who were in the leading team to launch this campaign to end impunity and bring about justice in Cambodia for human rights abuses, but in particular for extrajudicial killings. What is the aim of this campaign that you started this summer?
Thank you, Emil. Let me begin by thanking Liberal International and the ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights for holding this seminar, this webinar. The topic is ending impunity so we can find justice for those killed by state-backed killings. Today also marks the 27th anniversary of the Constitution of the Kingdom of Cambodia. So ending impunity in Cambodia is the right topic to be discussing on the 27th anniversary of our Constitution. The Constitution of the Kingdom of Cambodia is the result of a long process for Cambodia, the parties in conflict for many years, to end that conflict through a peace by signing the Paris Peace Accord on 23rd October 1991. The spirit of the Constitution of the Kingdom of Cambodia is the spirit of the Paris Peace Accord, calling for national unity, the end of armed conflict, and to prevent at all costs the return to regime or to genocide, to the Khmer Rouge regime. 40 years have passed since the fall of the Khmer Rouge. 29 years have passed since the Paris Peace Accord was signed. However, extrajudicial killings, serious violations of human rights are committed every day. The Hun Sen regime in Cambodia still unjustly use methods to silence political opponents and adversaries. No independent legal investigations for these state-backed killings have been conducted. We will make it very clear. All state institutions are under tight grip of the regime, with massive oppression, including persecution of freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of the media, and civic activism. The Hun Sen's partisan politics dictate wide, inequitable political and social actions in Cambodia, preventing Cambodian justice from materializing. And that is why we, as members of the opposition, have launched a campaign on the 10th of July 2000 of this year, on the anniversary of the killing of a very well-known analyst, Professor Kem Lay. The name of the campaign is Together We Fight to End Impunity, so there is justice for victims of state-backed killings. The aim of the campaign is to take Hun Sen and his allies to an independent justice system. Among the hundreds killings backed by the state are the slaughter on Easter Sunday, 30 March 1997, with at least 15 people killed, mainly workers, the elderly, young children even, and up to 100 injured when 4 hand grenades were lobbed into a peaceful opposition protest. Nearby, standing right there, were heavily armed troops in full combat uniform, allowing those who lobbed the hand grenades to run into the headquarters of Mr. Hun Sen, just across the street from where the protest was being conducted. In the same year, on July 1997, a coup d'etat led by Hun Sen against the Prime Minister at the time, Prince Norodom Ranariddh. During that coup d'etat, dozens of police officers, military and civilians were killed. On 8 February 2003, Venerable Sun Pun Thien, a monk who advocated for the rights for monks to have the right to vote, was assassinated. On the 22nd January 2004, a well-known, the fearless leader of a trade union was assassinated, Chia Vichir. On the 26th April 2012, Chut Vuthi, a fearless environmentalist, was murdered right in that forest where he was monitoring the deforestation, which is widely conducted in Cambodia. As I said, on the 10th of July 2016, Professor Kem Lay, the man of the people, was assassinated in broad daylight. Now we have a video about the killing of a well-known actress, a royal ballet dancer, Piset Pilaka, murdered in broad daylight on 6 July 1999.
តើយុត្តិធម៌ឬនីតិរដ្ឋភាពអ្នកស្រីពិសិដ្ឋពីលីកាគឺជាតារាសម្ដែងភាពយន្តនិងជាគ្រូរបាំដ៏មានប្រជាប្រិយភាពមួយរូបនៅក្នុងប្រទេសកម្ពុជាអ្នកស្រីពិសិដ្ឋពីលីកាត្រូវបានខ្មាន់កាំភ្លើងបាញ់ចំនួន3គ្រាប់កាលពីថ្ងៃទី6ខែកក្កដាឆ្នាំ1999ដែលប្រជាពលរដ្ឋខ្មែរហៅមរណភាពរបស់អ្នកស្រីគឺជាការបាត់បង់ធនធានជាតិមួយដ៏កម្រតើអាជ្ញាធរពិតជាខ្វះសមត្ថភាពឬមួយអ្នកសម្លាប់អ្នកបញ្ជាឲ្យសម្លាប់គឺជាអ្នកមានអំណាចនៅក្នុងករណីបាញ់សម្លាប់អ្នកស្រីពិសិដ្ឋពីលីកានេះដែរត្រូវបានទស្សនាវដ្តីមួយឈ្មោះថា Express បានដាក់ចំណងជើងជាភាសាបារាំងថា Révélation sur un crime état ដែលប្រែថាការលាតត្រដាងនៅឧក្រិដ្ឋកម្មដែលបង្កឡើងដោយភ្នាក់ងាររដ្ឋបានសរសេរចំថាលោកស្រីប៊ុនរ៉ានីភរិយាលោកហ៊ុនសែនគឺជាអ្នកបញ្ជាឲ្យសម្លាប់អ្នកស្រីពិសិដ្ឋពីលីកាដោយផ្អែកលើភស្តុតាងមួយចំនួនមានដូចជាសៀវភៅកំណត់ហេតុរបស់អ្នកស្រីពិសិដ្ឋពីលីកាក្មួយស្រីរបស់អ្នកស្រីបានរងរបួសដៃនិងគេទន្ទឹមជាមួយអ្នកស្រីក្នុងរថយន្តដែលអះអាងប្រាប់ទស្សនាវដ្តី Express ថាអ្នកស្រីពិសិដ្ឋពីលីកាខំប្រាប់នាងថាលោកស្រីប៊ុនរ៉ានីហ៊ុនសែនជាអ្នកទទួលខុសត្រូវក្នុងការបាញ់ប្រហារនេះយើងរួមគ្នាបញ្ចប់នីតិរដ្ឋភាពដើម្បីយុត្តិធម៌នៅកម្ពុជា
Thank you, Sukua, for giving us the insight of this really tragic stories. One can really be left speechless after listening to every fact that you presented of people who have been assassinated at a close range and whose murders have not been cleared all up to date. Kunkasit, you are there in the region of Southeast Asia. You are a board member of the ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights, APHR. You have a wealth of experience in the organization, coming with statements, reports, analysis of what has been a backsliding in terms of democracy and human rights situation in Cambodia over the last years and decades. What is your take on this initiative to raise this international campaign to bring about end of impunity and to bring basically justice for the victims of what is happening in Cambodia?
Before answering your question, let me give a bit of my own personal account. The past 40 years as a Thai diplomat and member of parliament and in the cabinet. For the past 40 years, since my young diplomatic day, I have been involved with the Thai-Cambodian issues and with the Cambodian issues. I was present at the first Paris Peace Conference, 1989, but I did not attend the final one because by then I was posted in Moscow already. But even before that, we were in support of the tripartite coalition government fighting the Khmer Rouge and the Vietnamese occupation of Cambodia. We were successful in making Vietnam withdraw, and eventually it led to the peace conferences and the UN administration and the constitution that Muso Shua just mentioned, that Cambodia is and will be and will continue to be and must be a democratic constitutional kingdom. I think that's still the objective for the Cambodians and for all of us who are liberals and Democrats. And the only thing that we have for the Cambodian is for peace and prosperity to come. So that's my own personal wish, and also as a member of the ASEAN community and also as a member of the ASEAN Parliamentarian for the Human Rights. Okay. The point is that the second point is that the only constant factor in Cambodia for the past more than 30 years is Somdet Hun Sen, the Prime Minister. As a member of the Khmer Rouge, as an anti-Khmer Rouge, then work with the Vietnamese, then agreed to the Paris Peace Conference, then sort of a parliamentary coup d'etat and so on. So he has been the constant factor. Why so? Because he has been able to control the military establishment. And then with that, and with the wealth accumulated and so on, he was able to control the majority inside the parliament. So he is more or less the absolute power in Cambodia. So this is what we are fighting against. So it's I think the challenges is formidable, very formidable, but it is not insurmountable. That's why we are here together with Liberal International, and we're working together with the Democrats around the world. I think we have to continue to persevere and to keep on pushing. Now, before the coming of APHR, it was a caucus to push for the return of democracy in Myanmar. We were in support of Daw Aung San Suu Kyi. And in a sense, we were part of the successful story of pushing out the military government, I think the entry of the constitution and the eventual elections in Myanmar, although it is not a full-fledged democracy, but there has been, I think, much progress in Myanmar. If we could have done that collectively together, then why not with the Cambodia question, okay? But we have to be very firm, and then we have to work very hard. It is not only that Hun Sen is more or less in full control of Cambodia. He has the full support from Beijing, from China. He's a client state of Beijing. And then at the same time, he has a comfort zone inside the ASEAN community, because the other ASEAN leaders were afraid or reluctant to say something about the atrocities that have been going on in Cambodia under the leadership of Hun Sen. So in that sense, APHR working together with Liberal International, with the Councils of Asian Liberals and Democrats, with the Asia Network for Democracy and other NGOs and so on. We have to continue and work as much as possible, as much as we can, so that we can end the impunity in Cambodia under the leadership of Hun Sen. I remain determined and optimistic. I'm sure a lot of my Cambodian friends inside Cambodia and outside of Cambodia in particular have that same optimism and determination. So I think this seminar of ours at this very moment, I think, is to consolidate our joint efforts and keep on pushing at the United Nations, at the UN Security Council, and directly with the Chinese government, with the Russian governments and so on, that they have to come around. They are part and parcel of the peace and security making, but they cannot be the spoilers of democracy and regional harmony and national harmony. I think that APHR is small in number, only 140 of us and so on, members of parliament and former members. But I think we have been very vocal, and then we have been getting support from the international community. We are being encouraged, and I think we are determined to move and to work with our Cambodian liberals and Democrat friends to end this impunity as well as authoritarianism in Cambodia.
Thank you very much, Kun Kasit. Being vocal, this is what you said. This is what you have been doing throughout your years. But also, Abid, you have been the one who has been very vocal and outspoken on the question of human rights. You do that now as a member of the European Parliament from Sweden, from Centerpartiet, but you also have Iraqi origin. And in Liberal International, where you're vice president on the bureau, you have been active for a number of years. It was actually you, under your guidance, that the Liberal International's Human Rights Committee was revived. And we have seen you speaking about human rights issues all around the world. Wherever there was a breach of human rights, we would hear Abir being active personally and also on behalf of your party. You have also spoken on the case of Cambodia. I remember vividly last year when we were in the European Parliament. What is your take on this initiative of this campaign? And I think the microphone should be switched on so that we can hear you, because we cannot hear you at the moment. Unmute again. And good. No, we still have problems hearing you. Maybe you just connect your earphones so that we can hear you up as loud and as clear as you have done it last year from the European Parliament, where we had a visit with the delegation of the...
So I don't know if you can hear me better now?
But we can hear you perfectly, as we are used, very loud and clear.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, that's just a part of my personality, being very loud. Well, thank you so much, Emil, for having me here in this very esteemed panel. I feel like I'm a student with those two friends who spoke before me, who've been in the fight for Cambodia for a very long time. And comparing to you, I am your student and you are my teachers. For me, coming also from Iraq, from a family that belonged to the Iraqi opposition and forced to go in exile at very early age, for me, there is a special spot in my heart for all those families who actually sacrifice so much of their private life so they can achieve a democratic development in their countries. And I know that many of you have been forced to actually go in exile simply to stay alive, simply because they have a different opinion, simply because they want a better development for their country. And that is not always appreciated by the kids. I was never very happy because we didn't have an ordinary family life. But now growing up, I understand what kind of strength it have given us. For me, working for human rights, no matter where, even if I don't have any direct connection to Cambodia, unfortunately, besides me following the breaches of human rights and the dictatorship evolving, or has been evolving for a while now in Cambodia, it is for me of a vital importance, and it lies in the center of my heart. Speaking out on the situation in Cambodia is very much needed, needless to say, given the severe conditions in the country, which in the last 3 years are going from bad to worse to worse. And we have just heard the previous two speakers, Mo Sushwa and Kasipi Pirumaya. Cambodia is one of the countries like Venezuela, which is exemplary how an authoritarian regime with dictatorial tendencies can be very harmful for its own citizens. And no one can remain silent in such conditions. And I mean, from Ally, from Liberal International, we have been warning for the situation for years now, and been with close contact with the opposition leaders, among them Mr. Ramzi. And we have been warning for the regime of Hun Sen in abusing the power of the back of the Cambodian citizens in order to entrench his regime and manipulate all segments of power. Today, Cambodia is a classic example of a dictatorship where, for the will of the ruler, who is the Prime Minister Hun Sen, and not the king, anything is possible, and where the life of the citizens costs nothing. Liberal International has been very vocal in all international fora and in front of the government around the world that Hun Sen regime must be condemned and face the consequences. The European Parliament and the EU have also not stayed silent, and thanks to the hard work of the opposition that have been very, very good on lobbying the European Parliament and the Council and the European External Action Service. It actually acts, and sometimes we are surprised that the EU is acting on international issues, but it actually acts. And it started with the resolution adopted by the European Parliament in the aftermath of the arrest of the CNPR leader, Kem Sokha, and the questionable dissolution of the CNRP party over the clear position of the European Commission and the European Council, all the way to the unprecedented decision of the EU this summer to suspend partially the everything but the arms preferential trade deal with Cambodia, as it's called the EBA. The EBA partial suspension was the first time in the history of the EU has taken such a measure, and it was a clear message to the regime in the capital that the behavior that has been demonstrated by the oppressor in Cambodia cannot go unpunished. Punishment, it's not a goal in itself. It never is. But justice for the citizens of Cambodia is the single goal. And we are all convinced that the people of Cambodia deserve to live in a state where the rule of law is intact, where you have democracy, where you have a multi-party system, and where you have free, transparent, and fair elections. In that sense, there is a very clear coherence within with the aim of the campaign to investigate the crimes and make sure that justice is being served. So a part of my work in LI and in the European Parliament, I have spoken out personally about the situation in Cambodia. The last time I did, Hun Sen's reaction was to blacklist me and a couple of my other European liberal colleagues from entering Cambodia. I took that scandalous decision with a pride, as I understood that my work and my message has been clearly heard, analyzed, and did hit the nerve of Hun Sen. I could not have received a greater motivation to be even more vocal in defending the millions of Cambodians that suffer greatly under the regime of Hun Sen. It always reminds me how actually the dictator Saddam Hussein went from being a nobody to becoming a somebody and then become everybody. And how he, after 35 years of oppression, of systematic killing of opposition leaders, of people who actually maybe didn't want to make a revolution, but didn't think that that was a just, fair treatment of the state, he systematically killed everyone. He was, and he became the state of Iraq. How he, in the end of the journey of his life, was found in a hole under the ground. And I mean, it is actually every leader, political leader, question that they have to ask themselves. Do I want to end up there, or do I want to end up to being a respected citizen in my country? This train has passed for Hun Sen, being a respected citizen in his country. And I think that it is very important that we keep being vocal and outspoken, so we can also in our channel support the campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. Thanks also for this very personal message and bringing the relationship between the stories that dictators do not understand when they capture the state for their own and for themselves, and when they identify themselves fully with the state. And so, Ku, I guess this is an encouraging tone that you're hearing, because after this really grave situation that Cambodia has been living over the last 3 decades, especially in the last couple of years, there is a resonance of what you're doing, or your message is being heard by the international community of democratic nations. Kun Kasit spoke about the necessity to bring up the issue and speak on the most important level in the UN Security Council, even with parties like Russia and China. And Abir was reminding us that Democrats actually, the despots and the dictators do not end up like Democrats remembered well in the history, but they end up hiding in a hole under the ground. But back to this campaign, how can this campaign actually help to achieve your goal? What is it that you expect to reach as an aim of this campaign?
First, as I must say that we cannot and we will not remain silent, despite the fact that it is almost impossible for even one woman, one young woman, to speak out and to lead her own campaign to protect the environment of Cambodia. She is behind bars, and there are many other. Every day, people are arrested for speaking out. That we are inspired in Cambodia. We're inspired by what is happening in Thailand today. The youth standing up, taking their own movement to find change or better change for justice for themselves and for the country. Kun Kasit is here with us, and I greatly appreciate the experience and the investment that Kun Kasit has been given into the situation in Cambodia. Abir, I am so grateful and always grateful to hear your voice and to know that you are determined inside the Parliament of the EU, fighting for the voice of the people of Cambodia. So that's why we have to launch a campaign to end impunity in Cambodia. It's been 3 months since we launched the campaign on the anniversary of the killing of Mr. Kemlay, a very important, outspoken man of the people, on the 10th July of this year. So 3 months have passed, and we have collected over 22,000 signatures. And we have seen that 25% of the 22,000 signatures come from inside Cambodia, despite the fact that people live in fear. And fear actually cannot stop people from thriving, from fighting, struggling for justice. We are very, very encouraged. What do we want? What in the campaign? We want to raise awareness in the international community about the untenable conditions in Cambodia, the serious violations of human rights, the dictatorship, the unresolved state killings. And the international community and the ASEAN, as Kun Kasit rightly pointed out, have more or less remained silent on the state-backed killings in Cambodia. What else are we doing in terms of the campaign? We're working in parallel on preparation of a white paper as a research project on investigation of major criminal cases and with analysis on the issue of impunity in Cambodia. That white paper is a working title, would have a working title, Murders but No Search for Criminals, a critical study on issue of impunity under Hun Sen's regime. It will be accompanied with case reports of each victim murdered by the Hun Sen regime since the signing of the Paris Peace Accord. It is essential that we have the white paper. We collect the real cases with the faces of the people who have the victims and their families who are still seeking for justice. Otherwise, the regime of Hun Sen will rewrite history for their own good. Otherwise, the murders, the very massacre, sometimes not just murder, massacre conducted under the regime of Mr. Hun Sen will remain unresolved. And as Cambodians, we cannot accept that. And we are very encouraged by the support from distinguished members of parliament, from politicians, and from non-Cambodians as well. We believe that the finding that will be produced by the paper will be motivation for serious work to be done through independent investigations of these killings. There can be various ways for such independent investigation. In fact, I personally have been in contact with Professor Agnes Kalama, the UN independent person in charge of independent investigation. I have also been in contact with the families of the victims who are now in Finland and one family in Sweden, Abir. So let's work on that and give the families the hope, that hope that there will be justice, that justice that they have been waiting for over some 20 years. The universal jurisdiction and with the protocol of the UN on independent investigation, taking it to the UN Human Rights Council, we hope, but however, we are not naive that we will not be facing obstacles, especially from the supporters of Hun Sen in first line Beijing. But we are optimistic, we remain optimistic that a working and functional method can be found to have such independent international investigations, which will come up with clear facts and undeniable evidences on who perpetrated the killings. And the killings must stop so that Cambodia can move forward for national reconciliation, for true development and true peace. Those evidences should then be taken over by international legal bodies, which have to ensure that the perpetrators of the killing and the crimes are brought to justice. That's what we want. No, it will be a long process. However, we know that justice have been served to such state-backed killings in other countries, in other continents, such as in South America, in Africa, in Europe.
So good, that's very important message that the justice is not unique to be served only in Cambodia, but actually the aim of the campaign is to help the Cambodian citizens actually enjoy justice in their own country as an example for the rest of the world. And it's good to connect with your work, Kunkasit, because you have a wealth of experience that you mentioned a little bit in your previous talk. You also mentioned you were posted in Moscow, you were in Washington, you were in Tokyo, you were in the United Nations, you've been in the Thai diplomatic service for 40 years. How do you see the prospects of this campaign?
Well, I am optimistic first. And second, I think I'm determined, and I think most so sure her friends and all the Cambodians and so on are all determined. It is the determination. And then I think goodness lasts longer than badness. That's the first point. Second is Somdet Hun Sen, he's almost 70 years old now. He can go on in power for 10 years, 15 years, but whatever it is, but I think that is not important. I would like to use this opportunity to speak humbly to Somdet Hun Sen that once he is out, he passes away, he will not be in the position to protect his children and his family. So I think as a good Buddhist, I hope he is still, he has to look to the future of his family, his children and grandchildren. That if he doesn't change his mind, that he doesn't compromise, relinquish the power, open democracy back to Cambodia, it's only the legacy of revenge, of punitive action and so on. So why not? He's still relatively healthy. He should pave the way for the return of democracy. He could even enter the monkhood to reflect and to forgive and to reconcile. Because without doing good things before he passes away, there is no protection for his family and for his children and for the grandchildren. They will have no place to live in Cambodia. Definitely, they will have difficulties living outside Cambodia and so on. That's one message through this seminar, webinar and so on to Hun Sen. I still honor him as a sort of political friend or colleague. I think we have to speak frank to one another. That's the first point. Second, let me recapitulate a bit, that I think we are having a sort of a three-pronged approach. One is to continue to be very vocal everywhere that we can, to bring about the end of the impunity, return of justice, peace and harmony in Cambodia. Second is the investigation, the independent one or the one undertaking under the leadership of Mo Social. We have to render all the support and so on. We could inform at the moment the International Law Commission, the UN, the Human Rights Council, the ICC, the International Court of the Criminal Court and so on. All of these major institutions should be informed. I think we could do this collectively together. So on the investigation side, the conveying of the information and so on. And third, I would like to propose here, I think which was being discussed some years back about targeted sanctions to the whole entourage of Hun Sen and so on. Members of his party, members of the parliament, the judicial body that is under complete control of Hun Sen. Say the top 3,000 elites of Cambodia, they must be internationally sanctioned, targeted sanction. They should not be allowed to travel. We all can check about their bank accounts in, some of the countries in the neighborhood or in the Caribbean island and so on. Their children and so on should not have the privilege of having to go and studying abroad because the money for their education and so on is not clean money. It's all from extorted or I think cheated or taken from the ordinary citizen of Cambodia. So the 3 or 4 prong approach that we could do more and then we continue to do so. I think we can link up, of course, with the European Parliament, with the major political parties of European countries. We could link with the EU as a whole through the Commission and so on. Then we can work with the International Criminal Court in The Hague. We can work with various UN agencies, both in Vienna, Geneva, besides in New York and so on. I think this is what we are determined to do, but we will get more organized, more sort of a networking. I think we will bring justice to Cambodia. I think we will make sure that at the end of the day soon, that Hun Sen must come around and compromise.
Thank you, Khun Kasit. It is indeed about bringing up all possible means that are at disposal of the international democratic community in order to address the grave situation. And in that sense, Abir had a very good point earlier. She said she has no personal connection with Cambodia, except that she is touched whenever she sees the suffering of the people who under the regime, be it in her native Iraq or anywhere else in the world. Some people, some despots, some dictators have hoped that the corona crisis will actually present them an opportunity to entrench their power, and that they will be able to, in the wake of this new reality that we live in today, they believe that they can do whatever they want. Abir, what is your message to them and to Hun Sen? Can we expect Liberal International and the European Parliament to keep up being active and support the cause of the campaign?
I mean, those responsible for committing the crimes and responsible for the suffering of the Cambodians people, of the Cambodians, can be assured that even if Cambodia is far away geographically from Europe, neither distance nor pandemic will stop our work. On the contrary, the digitalization of information and the interconnectivity makes the involvement of us even easier. So yes, bad news for the criminals and dictators. We are not giving up, even if there is a pandemic going on. Liberal International was vocal on the situation in Cambodia during the summer. We had 2 online debates on the topic, and even the presidents of the Liberal International and the European Liberal Democrats were involved. In mid-August, we had launched a public call to sign the petition that Suchwa just explained. We didn't stop working, and as you see, we don't intend to stop either. Also, in the middle of the summer, the European Union enacted the partial suspension of the EBA trade preferences with Cambodia. The EU has demonstrated that it is very clear, as long as there are breaches of international obligations by the authorities in Cambodia with regards to international conventions of civil and political rights, as long as democracy is not restored and human rights respected, the EU will react. It was clearly said also that the EU's EBA suspension was based on the resolution of the European Parliament that we adopted in 2018. May I remind also what the resolution said as well, and I quote, it called for targeted sanctions towards those responsible to the deterioration of the situation with democracy and human rights in Cambodia. The European Parliament is very clear on that. We will pressure for such sanctions to be introduced towards the regime's members, especially as the situation in the country continues to worsen with massive arrests and use of violence against peaceful citizens. Such sanctions can be introduced either directly stemming from the European Parliament resolution or based on an upcoming Magnitsky law that the European Commission is preparing. So we have, 2 possibilities to enact such sanctions. Finally, I just want to say it is about justice. Let's not forget that there is the legal mechanism of universal jurisdiction. For those who don't know, universal jurisdiction, as you also mentioned, Mo, is the idea that national court may prosecute individual for serious crimes against international law, such as crimes against humanity, war crimes, genocide, and torture, based on the principle that such crimes harm the international community or international order itself. That legal mechanism exist in some EU member states. Hence, the findings of the international investigations are important as they could trigger legal mechanism based on universal jurisdiction, especially if it concerns current EU citizens. That can be a great outcome for the campaign to end impunity. And I will try when I get back to Brussels to actually involve with a dialogue with the president of the Renew Group and see how we can actually maybe write a new urgency resolution on Cambodia due to the unfortunate events during summer, and to also encourage and push the Commission to act even in a faster pace, and also see if there are several MEPs who want to sign the campaign to end impunity. That I can take with me.
Thank you, Abir, for this note and basically ensuring us that the work continues and it doesn't stop regardless to COVID. You mentioned something very important, that we live in a digital world today and that the information is present over there. And I have been just reminded of a video that we have received recently from Cambodia, where a peaceful protest of women has been treated in such a violent and brutal way by the police without any consequences. A woman was basically brought by the police, smashed her head against the street, felt unconscious, taken to hospital. These are classical examples of torture, of abuse of people, crimes that are committed by the regime that nobody is being held responsible for. And this cannot go on. I mean, Yes, Belarus is on the agenda of many at the moment. It's in the headlines of the news, but similar things have been happening in Cambodia for a while, and this cannot go unpunished. You also mentioned the digital sphere. I saw a number of comments among the viewers. We had tons of viewers. We had over 14,000 people who followed the discussion, and very many of them are basically coming up with messages of encouragement to ensure that Paris peace accords are being respected, and that the money that are being taken by the regime in an illegal way should not be allowed to be used for their own benefit. So the comments of support and encouragement to the work that is done by Sukua and her team and everybody else who supports, like Kunkasit and Abir, it's very strong in the messages that I can see online. I would like to open up for a final round of comments. Kunkasit, you were having personal message to Hun Sen. As somebody who has been involved in politics in the region for a number of years, and you said that you are optimistic. Do you have any final words?
The final word would be to my own ASEAN leaders of the 10. And in this sense, I'm pointing my finger in particular to the President of Indonesia. I hope that he's a Democrat, directly elected for the second term. It's about time that he assumed the mentorship of ASEAN leader. Because without Indonesia to push for something to move forward in ASEAN, it would be very difficult. And then he's from a democratic president, from very much of the most advanced democratic country in the region at the moment. Then Indonesia must come more forward up front and lead the democratic changes in the Southeast Asia, at the same time also to help arrest the decline of democracy in Southeast Asia. It's all stipulated in the ASEAN Charter, which is, I think, a sort of law-abiding document for all the ASEAN countries. So that message, I think if Indonesia were to come around, and I think there would be some changes, not only in Cambodia, but in some of the authoritarian one-party regimes in the ASEAN community.
Thank you.
And I hope to be able to work more and more with my Indonesian counterpart.
Thank you very much, Mr. Okunkasit, for your words of wisdom and a clear message to the prominent Democrats in the region, like the President of Indonesia, Jokowi. Abir, what would be your final thoughts?
Well, I mean, the esteemed colleague Kasit just said, or in the previous intervention said that you have to do good so your family also gets good when you leave this earthly life. And I think it's, even if it sounds very philosophic, but the leaders actually need to always ask themselves, who am I hurting? Who I'm doing good for? And when they cannot find an answer for that anymore, on one question, who I'm doing good for, if it's only of egoistical, selfish reasons, and if there is a big answer for who I'm hurting, then it is very high time to leave. And unfortunately, the leadership in Cambodia, that train has passed where they can self-reflect. And the development can get much worse, and the people of Cambodia will be those who are paying the price. I can reassure you that I will do my utmost. I'm already on it, working to have meetings with my colleagues, both from AFET, AFET is the Committee on Foreign Affairs, and also with other members of European Parliament, so we can maybe get a group get a number that will sign the petition so we can also get it up on the international agenda. And this is what I can do. I can always speak about Cambodia in those terms, and to put it always on the agenda so we can push forward the EU.
Thank you, Abir. This is actually extremely important what you're mentioning, because people like you can actually bring about governments to move. So Kua, what is your final message as one of the leading persons of this campaign?
I am a very practical person. Therefore, I would like to see things done quickly and in a practical way. So far, in the past 3 months, we have collected over 22,000 signatures, and I hope that from now, we can see these signatures coming up every second. We ask you all who are watching to take this campaign to every single network you have, whether it is your school, your church, your political party, your friends, your families. Please add your names to and your signatures to this very important campaign. Together we fight to end impunity so we can find justice for victims of Cambodian state-backed killings. Again, I would like to say that we remain very optimistic, and with today, with the more confirmation from Kun Kasit representing ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights, so we'll be working with the ASEAN in the ASEAN communities. Abir, thank you very much again for your hard work at the European Parliament and for taking the lead, and especially having the same experience as Cambodia, being someone from Iraq. There is nothing, no tragedy, more tragedy than our two countries. We hope that, and we believe that with this determination, we can take this campaign to other spheres such as the academics. If you are among those who are watching right now and you know other institutions that can adopt and that can come in support of this campaign, especially in the universities, your students take this campaign with you. Again, I am very privileged actually to have such great groups of supporters in all over the world. Again, I stress that today is the 27th anniversary of the Constitution of the Kingdom of Cambodia. I leave you here because I have to go straight into another live stream in Cambodian, talking about our constitution, talking about rule of law, talking about the human rights of our people, and especially talking about the future. The future is a future not under Hun Sen. The future is a future under democracy, liberal values, and pluralism. The future of Cambodia, for the children of Cambodia, is not to send our people into Thailand as migrant workers and to be mistreated. The future of our country relies in our hope, and that hope will not vanish, and then justice will prevail. This is something I learned from Mr. Samrang-si, one of the leaders, the main leaders of the opposition in Cambodia. Justice will prevail. Thank you, Emil. Thank you, Liberal International and ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights for hosting this seminar.
Thank you very much, all of you, for your participation. Justice will prevail, as Rancy keeps on reminding us. And I would like to in particular thank APHR and Liberal International for making sure that this panel happens, and in particular to the three of you for sharing your thoughts. The audience has been vast. I see that we have reached 18,000 people within the last 1 hour, which is quite impressive. And to everybody who watches or who will watch it, I will just close with something that Kun Kasit mentioned in his words. And this should be something that should guide us in everything that we do. Goodness lasts longer than badness. Remember always that. Thank you very much, as you do in Southeast Asia, to bring my hands together. And I already announced that the next webinar on Cambodia will be in October. Thank you and have a lovely day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.